Good morning. Good morning. Happy Thursday. It is May 5th, 2022. For those celebrating it, happy Cinco de Mayo. My name is Carol White, and I am your host for this week's episode of When Life Needs a Detox. Now, our subject matter for the next couple of weeks is going to be on the subject of tithing. I've always wondered. So let's get started. Now, today's topic of I've always wondered is why do we tithe? Let me get through it before you start saying what an idiotic question. Now, last week we talked about what a tithe is, how the concept began, and what the tithes are fundamentally supposed to be used for. But now the one thing we didn't talk about was why do we tithe? I mean, think about it. If tithing is an Old Testament ritual, and there's nothing in the New Testament that says you actually have to tithe, why do we as Christians tithe? Why do we follow this practice? Now, there are a lot of reasons that have been given for this. And I'm going to tell you, it's these reasons that's always made me question tithing. Now, a lot of reasons that have been given sound like it's what you're supposed to do. It's expected. I was taught this practice as a child and it stayed with me. Tithing puts you in good standing with the church. And I know everybody's heard that. How else will the church pay its bills and afford the pastor's salary if you don't tithe? You have to give to get now. Blessings aren't free. Nobody's ever come up with a better way to get money into the church other than tithing. And like I said, don't frown up. There are people that actually think along these lines, and they do have these questions. But as I have learned from my personal tithing experience, my why is so much simpler than all of the reasons that I just laid out. I tithe because I'm grateful for what I have. And tithing is just one of the ways that I have to tell the Lord, thank you. That's right. Tithing is about grace and gratitude. Think about it this way. We as Christians believe that what we have is due not only to the fact that we worked hard for it, but because God has equipped us with all the tools we need and the right level of assistance when we need it in order to accomplish whatever goals we set for ourselves. To give God a portion of what we have received in relation to what we are receiving is just a way to say thank you. Your tithe is part and parcel of your personal relationship with God, but it has nothing to do with your relationship to the church. And so many times people miss this point, and the tithing relationship will sometimes shift from being between God and man to being between man and church. And that's where a lot of tithing confusion comes in. Now, I also want to stress this. Tithing is a matter of trust between you and God. That's right. It is a matter of trust. Now, I had to learn this lesson a long time ago. And every now and again, I have to be reminded of that lesson. And I make it a point to remind myself of this lesson. So let me tell you my story about tithing. Excuse me. When I started on my tithing journey, I was afraid that giving God 10% of my paycheck would make it impossible for me to pay my bills. Now, this was also during a time when I had terrible, horrendous credit issues. And when I say horrendous, what I mean is I couldn't even get credit to buy a pack of gum. That's how bad my credit was. So rather than giving God 10%, I gave him what I thought I could afford. When my credit issues began to overtake me, and it got to the point where I was not only holding down a full-time job as a Chicago police officer, I had to go and find 3 part-time security jobs just to try to make these little ends meet. And they never did meet. Never. I finally had to realize that my method wasn't working. And I prayed to God to give me the strength to get out of debt without having to file bankruptcy, and to give me the courage to go on and tithe the 10% that I know I'm supposed to give. It was hard, but I did it. And I mean hard. And I made a lot of sacrifices in order to make that happen. I mean, instead of going shopping for designer bags and designer shoes, I was recycling fashion like nobody's business. Instead of buying my favorite name brand foods, Aldi was my best and favorite brand. Whatever it took to make ends meet. Didn't go out partying, didn't go out to dinner with my friends. I made it work. I made it happen. Now, eventually, I got a lateral move within the department into a unit that offered me so much overtime that I was able to let the 3 part-time security jobs go. Additionally, I not only cleared my debt, but I also had surplus income, a decent savings account, and I eventually never had to work overtime for the sake of debt ever again. And I didn't realize that this blessing had occurred until one day I'm getting up to go and work this overtime, and I'm upset and I'm frustrated. I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't understand why I'm still doing this. And I finally had to look at the miracle that had happened and the blessing that I had received. And I went in and I worked that day, and I told my sergeant, I am never working another piece of overtime again. You're signed up? No, I don't need it anymore. I don't want to work overtime. And I never worked another day of overtime while I was employed by the Chicago Police Department. I made God a promise when I discovered this blessing that as long as I received a paycheck of any kind, the level of debt he brought me out of, I would never see again. Y'all, that was 25 years ago. I had to actually think about this while I was writing this article for you guys. It has been 25 years since I was that crazy, debt-ridden, losing my mind person to where I am now. And this is a beautiful place to be. I have never looked back, and I have never doubted what God is capable of doing. So why do we tithe? We tithe out of love, thankfulness, gratitude, and trust. That's why we tithe. Now, that's it for what I have written today. And I'm not going to even take it any further. I'm not going to add to it. I think this speaks for itself. Tithing is a personal relationship with God. How you want your relationship to go is how you handle your tithe. Point blank, end of story. Now, next week, we're going to get into the bolts and brackets of this, or what they call the nuts and bolts. Because the question a lot of people have is, do you tithe on the net or the gross? Or even this, if you don't have any money, how do you tithe? So we're going to talk about all of that next week. I don't have any housekeeping items to give you. I just want to thank you so very much for giving me your time and attention this morning. And I want you to know that I love you to the moon and back. And I will see you here next week for another edition of When Life Needs a Detox. My name is Carol White, and I'm going to see you real soon. Bye-bye now.